Welcome to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. Today, we continue our interview with David Ellis, whose father, Vep Ellis, is a member of the Southern Gospel Music Hall of Fame. That and a whole lot more on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
You are now listening to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast, live from the beautiful city of Roses in Thomasville, Georgia. We're so glad you joined us today as two guys who love Southern gospel music have a nostalgic celebration of the individuals and groups whose musical legacy have left a lasting mark on Southern gospel music. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Wendell Carr and Andy Daughtry.
Welcome back to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. This is our episode number 2. Hey, we're glad that you found us. Glad that you tuned back in. We hope you enjoyed today's show. And right away, I want to give things over to my co-host, the Reverend Andy Daughtry.
And thank you, Wendell Carr. What a joy to be back together for the second episode of the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. We've been kind of taking these moments to introduce ourselves to our audience. And I thought a great way might be that we go back and maybe point out the very first Southern Gospel album that we bought with our own money. That's kind of a milestone in our fandom of Southern Gospel. And I thought it'd be great to share with the folks what you and I, in our younger days, purchased the very first time for a Southern Gospel album. Wendell, what was the first Southern Gospel album you purchased with your own money?
Well, the very first album that I purchased was from a store that, if you're familiar with Thomasville, you know the legend of this store, and it was Cocroft's Music Company down on Broad Street. And I went in there and was going through the different albums and stuff, and I found the Happy Goodman Family Wanted Live. Now, they recorded this in 1971 in St. Louis, Missouri. At that point, I had only seen the Goodmans on the Gospel Singing Jubilee on Sunday mornings. So to get a live recording with nothing but them from start to finish, it was as good for me as going to one of the concerts. But funny story about that album, Rick Goodman, who played the drums for his mom and dad, before the concert started, his bass drum or his kick drum was slipping around on the platform. So Rick found a hammer and some nails and proceeded to nail the kick drum into the stand so it wouldn't move on him when he tried to play. Well, this all happened, and he didn't realize that the microphones were already on. And so the MC of the concert was out front trying to introduce the Goodmans, and all of a sudden you hear,
"We're reinforcing the stage. We're bringing on a group here from the Kiel Opera House. I should say a bus load of them. And I should say the bus is fairly well loaded down."
Now, if you know the Goodmans, you know that they were some pretty good-sized people. And he even made the comment about, that the happiest group in the world, the healthiest group in the world. And I must say, their bus is pretty well loaded down. So that was, and then the Goodmans hit the stage, and boy, did they hit the stage. The first song they kicked off, "I'm Too Near Home." And boy, Eddie Crook on the piano, just a classic introduction to that song. And, off they went. And that album, boy, it meant the world to me. That's the same album they did, God Walks the Dark Hills, I'm Living in Canaan Land.
Yes.
Just so many Goodman classics on that one album.
Wow, you aren't kidding. Wow, that one had a lot of great ones. Nothing like the Goodmans opening with "I'm Too Near Home." And like you, my very first album was influenced by the Gospel Singing Jubilee. So many of us then. I told my brother the other day, and in fact, if I hear that theme song, I can smell bacon in my mind, cooking, because we all were having breakfast about that time. But my album was another group that was featured on the Gospel Singing Jubilee, the Spear Family. And the first album I bought was their 60th anniversary album.
We don't find any better in the singing convention category than what our own father wrote. And here's one he wrote back in the 30s. It's called Heaven's Jubilee.
Now, I bought that at the old TG&Y. How long has it been? A TG&Y. We call that, my brother and I, trash, garbage, and yo-yos, but that was just our nickname. But that wasn't trash, garbage, or yo-yos I bought in that album. It was solid gold for me. I had always loved the Spears, watching them. There was something about Brock and the way he communicated and did his MC work that touched my heart and resonated with me. I just knew he was a great guy, and he was so unique. He was easily, you knew it was Brock Spear when you heard him, when you saw him. And he was on that album with the current group. I believe Penny Carden from Valdosta was on that, soprano with them. And they did a double album. Live kind of brought things up to date. Then they went and brought back several of their great hits, Cornerstone, and several of those. The King is Coming, which was a huge one for them, kind of the first production number that you began to have in Southern gospel. And then, for me, the great exciting discovery was Mom and Dad Spear. And they reached back and brought 3 songs that had never been released before with Mom and Dad Spear. That was the first time I ever heard Mom and Dad Spear sing, and I was totally captivated by it. Then the Spear sisters, they came and did 2 or 3 more with the sisters, and Rosanelle's playing, being a pianist. I was blown away, and I just immediately fell in love with those 2. And so that was an album that I just wore out, and I remember it being so special to me. And that was a great influence on me, that Spears' 60th anniversary album from the old TG&Y, which held a special place in my heart.
And we'll be right back after these messages. Let's play some Southern gospel music trivia. Gospel Music Hall of Fame songwriter Vep Ellis was offered a television spot with CBS. After he turned down their offer, this TV series about the Wild West eventually took the programming slot that was offered to Vep. Name the series. We'll be right back with the answer after this.
Hi, welcome to Natural Music. Before you begin to look around our site, I want to personally thank you for checking out Natural Music and tell you a little bit more of what we're all about. Natural Music is a website that is designed to help people learn and play gospel music. My name is Ben Hart, and I was on the road for 5 years as a professional full-time gospel piano player. And in that time I spent on the road, I had people almost every night ask me how I learned and how they can go about learning to play this style. And to be truthfully honest with you, at that time, I didn't really have a good answer for them until now. I have been teaching gospel piano locally for a few years now, and I've stumbled upon what I think can make anyone and everyone with the want and desire to learn be able to play in the gospel style. Many have already started and were able to implement new things into their playing the very first week. So click the Get Started button and sign up, and we will see you on the inside.
To start learning gospel piano today, visit naturalmusicstore.com to take your piano playing to the next level. That's naturalmusicstore.com. Hi, Wendell Carr here with the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. When we were looking for a platform to host our new podcast, we looked at a lot of different platforms, but with Anchor, here are just a few of the reasons that helped us make up our mind. Number 1, hey, it's free. As they say, the price is right. It's also really convenient because they provide tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right on your phone or computer, no matter where we might be traveling. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It really is everything we needed for our podcast all in one place. So check out Anchor. It really is the easiest way to make a podcast. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Which TV series eventually took the spot offered to Vep Ellis by CBS on Sunday evenings? The answer? Gunsmoke. And that's our Southern Gospel Trivia question for today. Now here's Andy with part 2 of our interview with Reverend David Ellis.
Memories. Now, you also have some songwriting credits, and one that are made in the hymn books, and we still sing in Thomasville, is Love Is Why. And that had sort of a connection and influence with your dad, too. Did he kind of, with this, and you and your brothers are all in ministry, and I want to hear a little bit about them, too, the influence your dad had on you and your ministry and your songwriting, and you're certainly now with your preaching ministry.
Well, I'm the 4th generation of preachers in my family.
That's right.
But how the Love Is Why came about, Bill Lakey, who was a Baptist, had written the lyrics. He wrote several songs with Dad. Jesus Holds the Keys. Can't even think right now. But anyhow, he had sent Love Is Why to Dad for Dad to put the music to it. And Dad said he just nothing fit. And he had another friend of his to say, see if you can do something. It didn't fit. So he said, I'm going to send you a song, and I want you to see what you can do with it. Well, I had not been married long. We were living in Wichita Falls, Texas, and they were in Cleveland, Tennessee. So I sat down and I wrote the song the way that I wanted the song to be written. And my dad, he was also in band when he was in high school, but I really wanted to be a high school band director. I had a Dixieland band, and my music style was a little bit different than Dad's. And so when Dad came through Texas, and he was preaching a camp meeting there, he said, did you do anything with that song? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, let me hear it. So I sat down and I played it for him, and he said, nah, he said, nobody's going to sing the song with those chords in there. He said, take it back and redo it. And I said, oh, okay, I'll try. So I took it back, and I tried to change it, but I just couldn't. That was just the way it was in me. So finally I told Dad, I said, Dad, I can't change it. That's just the way I'm. He said, okay. So we'll see what happens to it. So that's how that one came about. I'm the oldest in the family. I've got 3 brothers and a sister, and all of us were involved in music. Richard, who was the middle child, he was the slowest to get involved, and yet when he did, he became the most proficient of all of us and has been recognized as one of the top 2 tenor singers in the world and has sung with the Metropolitan Opera. And so he's also sang with the Ellis brothers, so they got a wide range of talent.
Indeed. Wendell, have you got some things you'd like to add there?
Well, for one thing, I just would like to tell David a story, and I've told Andy this. I met David and Miss Wanda and their son Vep when I was in high school, because I actually was in the same chorus as their son Vep, and our music teacher was Miss Carolyn Henry here in Thomasville. And so we were connected musically that way. But when Brother David had the church in Thomasville, Harvest Temple Church of God, they used to broadcast on the radio station, which was my first job at a radio station. They used to broadcast at lunchtime. And so I would listen in to the service. But then at night, back then, everything was done by phone lines. So that line was open all the time. You know, I could listen in to anything that was going on in the church. So I'd be running a country music show on the air, but I'd have my headphones on and I'd be listening to Harvest Temple and their music there, because it did something for me. I loved hearing them. And so I guess I eavesdropped on their services there in Thomasville.
I didn't know you was doing that, man.
It is. Listen, David teased me the other day, you know, our choir in the middle of this pandemic has done the virtual choir presentation. And we were laughing the other day. He trained a lot of the folks that are still singing in the choir here at First Baptist, and they're some of our best. So we're thankful for his continued ministry here. And that was a great thing that, and your dad was a lot of the same way, such a talented singer and vocalist. I think, Wendell, what was the quote that you found about somebody called?
Frank Stamps quoted your dad saying, I had rather be known as a preacher who sings than a singer who preaches.
Yes. At Dad's memorial service, one of the speakers made this statement. He said, Vep Ellis is the only person I ever knew that was jealous of himself. He said, if you said he was a good preacher, yeah, but I can sing too. He said he was a good singer, yeah, but I can preach. And he said, and I can play the music. He didn't want to be known as, like he said, a singing preacher, a preaching singer. He wanted to be known as a singing preacher. There's one thing that's very unique about Dad, and I don't know if I've told you this, but you asked a while ago about something that stands out about my dad. You never really know things at the moment. You have to look back and see it. Now, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but back in 1954, something like that, CBS contacted Dad about a Sunday night primetime music TV program similar to Andy Williams and some of the others. And so Dad auditioned for that time slot with Edward R. Murrow and some others that I don't remember. And the CBS called Dad to New York City to meet with him. And it just happened that it was a time that we were all there as a family because we were going to East Point Preach the New York State Camp meeting. And we went to New York City, and my mother and my brothers, we walked around Times Square while Dad went up to meet with the president of CBS. And when Dad walked in, the lady told my dad, said, "You've got 15 minutes with him. He's a very busy man." And Dad thought, well, I'm just here anyhow. But when Dad went in, they told Dad that he had been chosen for this primetime television program on Sunday night. And he told Dad, he said, "Mr. Ellis said, you will be wealthier than you can imagine. You'll be world famous." And said, "We've already got the sponsors for this TV program, and all we need is your okay." And then they went on to say, "We've only got one request, and that is that you add some secular music to your gospel music." Dad's response was, "I can't do that." He said, "I can't turn my back on what has brought me to this point in my life." He said, "You don't understand, Mr. Ellis. We're offering you something that will make you richer than you can imagine and world famous." And this went on for about 45 minutes. Dad said, "You don't understand. I cannot add secular music to what I'm doing. It's either all gospel music or nothing." He said, "You don't understand." I said, "No, you don't understand." Dad turned to walk out and said, "It's been a pleasure meeting you, but I cannot betray my calling." And so Gunsmoke took my dad's place on television.
My goodness.
That
Says a lot about Vep Ellis. Yeah.
But I'm glad that he had that kind of conviction that made him stand strong and true regardless. I don't know if many men or women today would make that kind of a commitment, turn that down, but I just praise God that my dad had that kind of conviction.
Amen. He was gifted in so many ways, and his legacy carries on, and the influence that he had. And as I told you the last time you were in Thomasville, and it was my honor to play for you to sing some of your dad's songs, I said, we're going to keep this music alive, and we're going to keep not just the music for the music's sake, but the impact that it has on the kingdom, that it continues to have. That it's building of the kingdom, that it for this old saint of God that grew up with it, it gives them joy, it encourages them, and a younger audience finds something new when we share it, a new way. And I think that's a powerful thing about Vep Ellis's music.
Well, the thing that for several years, especially in those latter years when his health began to fail, every time I was with Dad, he'd say, "Son, don't let my music die. Do not let my music die." And he would tell that to my other brothers. And Dad died in 88. Finally, about 7 years later, I told my brothers, I said, if we don't do something to help Dad's music stay alive, we're going to be too old to do anything. And so that was the reason that we put a little quartet together called the Ellis Brothers, which was pretty a brilliant move to just name us that, I guess. But
very unique.
One of the few that have the same dad and mother anyhow anymore.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, I've tried to check it out. I think we are the only 4 sons of a person who recorded music written by their father in gospel music.
I think you're right.
So we made 2 CDs of Dad's music. Of course, a lot of people don't know that my dad had a record club back in the 50s where he would make a little 45 every month, send it out to a mailing list, and if you liked it, you sent $1 back, and if you didn't, you sent the record back. Well, we never got a record back. But during that time, and this was back in that time, Dad was the person in history to make a multiple recording where he sang all 4 parts and played all the instruments. And that was during the time that CBS became so interested in what he was doing.
I have a set of those CDs. That's the volume 1, 2, and 3, right, that you have available. And I have that set. And it's amazing to hear him. He's doing everything on the CD. And it is an amazing thing. He really did. He was so talented. What a great voice. Just a really smooth voice and really timeless voice. It's not a dated sound at all. And timeless voice.
Back in his early days, radio stations began referring to him as the Bing Crosby of gospel music. He said, I'm not anybody else, I'm myself. So he didn't like
Say, I'm not Bing, I'm Vep. And
the voices were a lot similar. And Dad had a wide range. And like I said earlier, he was such a genius about it. He had a perfect pitch, but he could hear things that most people could not hear. Jim Burns, who was one of the professors of music at Lee University, said Vep Ellis was born with more music knowledge and understanding than the rest of us spent 8 years or 10 years or 12 years studying, trying to learn. And in fact, he would challenge people who thought they knew music. He said, just take this song back in there in the music department, and heaven's joy awaits. And when you learn to sing this song, come out and tell me, and I'll say you learned something.
there you go. A great convention. And boy, Gaither's treatment of that, the Gaither Vocal Band, probably the last 10, 15 years, probably one of the top quartets in the world, really, beyond the country. An a cappella recording of that shows how great that one stands up. That is some good stuff. Yeah, you're right. It's musically complicated. That convention style singing, which he did a lot of writing for that. That's a thing that's difficult to do well, to put it all together.
It really is. And Dad was doing it when he was so young. And I was talking to my brother Richard yesterday, and I said, do you realize how young Dad was when he wrote, I Know He Heard My Prayer? He said, no. I said, he was 26 years old. He said, what? And he was writing songs when he was in his 20s, early 20s, that would just boggle the mind of some songwriters today. Four-part harmony and sometimes four-part melody. Like Heaven's Joy, it's actually a four-part melody.
It really is. And it's indicative of his uniqueness and his style. And Vep Ellis's songs just have a certain rich quality to them that when most Southern gospel lovers hear it, they go, that sounds like a Vep Ellis song. I just think that's got to be a Vep Ellis song. And it's an intangible quality that it communicates, and it's singable. You hear it in your head. You can hum it. It's memorable. You can remember it.
I'm not prejudiced about this, but Bill Gaither writes a lot like my dad. In fact, he said when he was a young fella, he would get to the gospel concerts when Dad was going to be there as early as he could so he could get a front row seat. And He said that inspired him in his songwriting. And songs like Because He Lives sounds a whole lot like something that Dad would write.
I agree.
And so when I hear his songs, I hear the same thing. It's a story.
It is. It
tells
something.
You can remember. It stays with you 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 75 years from now, they're still there.
Do you think that may be obviously one of his legacies? I think certainly his ministry and the lives that were touched by it in terms of his preaching ministry is a legacy, and their, entire families were changed by that. But maybe in terms of Southern gospel music, that might be his greatest legacy. What do you think that is for Vep Ellis as you look at it and consider it now?
For myself and from what I have heard from others all across the country, especially in the last few years, because the generation that knew Dad are just about gone. But the thing they always had a message, and you never forgot them. It just becomes a part of you. And I was in a place a few months ago, I don't remember now exactly where it was, and I started singing My God Can Do Anything, not thinking that anybody that was in the audience would even know it, because it wasn't a church setting. And I looked, and nearly everybody in the audience was singing the song right along with me. And I was shocked because it wasn't that kind of a setting. So I said, well, God enabled Dad to reach more people than I actually thought.
Indeed. We never know, do we, where that music has gone and what lives have been touched already.
Well, it's like I told you about what is now called the old Redback hymnal. I remember I was only 11, 12 years old. My dad was he had already served as a music editor of the Church of God Publishing, the music department, Tennessee Music, but he had only served in 1 year, and I was on the music committee. He had gone and met with the music committee and had suggested that the Church of God put a hymnal together. And the idea was not too well accepted because hymns were just not really a part of our Southern gospel convention type music. But Dad got a few others, and they prevailed, and they put together the old Redback hymnal. And I actually traveled with Dad selling the very first ones. But that was a long time ago. Next year will be 70 years. Now there are more non-Pentecostal churches buying it, Baptists especially, than Church of God or Pentecostal churches. It's the number one hymnal of all time and around the world. And my dad would be totally shocked today if he could be here to see what that seed of thought that God gave him back in the 50s has become around the world. It's just amazing. That's one of my proudest moments whenever I go to some place and I see one of those hymnals. I see Dad's songbooks, and Dad's songbooks reached a lot of people. But that hymnal has gone where he could not have gone and done what he could not have done and introduced music to people that he could never have done. It's like, I'm sure Paul the Apostle would be shocked today to find out how far his letters to Corinthian church.
Indeed. I know my Redback is a treasured possession. And Wendell, I know that's the way you feel.
That's right. You know how many copies I have in small print, large print, every kind of print I could get my hands on. That's an amazing story, David. That touches my heart to know that we actually have a connection with someone, through you that actually has reached the world like that through that Redback book, because I know what it means to me, and I know what it means to so many other people. It's kind of like the Bible and the Redback hymnal. They kind of go hand in hand,
Thanksgiving night. David, I probably haven't told you this story. Thanksgiving night here in Thomasville. We have a family in our church, Trotters. Ted and Gail, known them a long time, singing our choir. She plays the organ and piano with us a lot. Her brother-in-law is a member of First Baptist Cleveland, Tennessee. Tony and his family, they all get together. They come here. Well, a few years ago, they called me and said, hey, we're going to have a Redback hymnal singing around. They brought all his hymnals, and we need a piano player. Can you come over? And so for the last several years, in fact, we've done it just about every year I've been in Thomasville. And on Thanksgiving night, and they put on pots of chili and invite whoever wants to come. And we pass the hymn books out all around the house. And I get to the piano, and the vocal line carriers get around the piano. And we start at the beginning and go all the way to the end. And
we sing until.
We sing until we can't sing anymore.
Until we can't sing no more.
And it's a Redback. And I have countless minister of music friends. This is Georgia Baptist guys that devote entire services annually that are some of their largest attended services of singing. They call them Redback hymnal singings. That's what church hymnal singings are, Redback. That's the way we know it. Large churches, First Baptist Statesboro, I know has had a hymn sing. Good friends in Metro Atlanta, of course, and Gerald Wolf and the gospel music hymn sing is using that Redback across the country. And they are placing that DVD with our nursing homes across the country. People are donating and giving that and making them available to our friends, our shut-ins in the nursing homes, so they can still enjoy that music. Even today, it is ministering every day in this country. That hymnal and that work. And thank God your dad said to the Church of God, we need to put this hymnal together. That's a thing you couldn't have envisioned. That's something, isn't it wonderful when you see what God does?
What God does.
When you're just faithful, Vep was just faithful, and then you can see God did that.
I can just imagine, because, a lot of our Church of God churches, they've been getting rid of the hymnal because we don't use those anymore. And some, I can just see this, that some were probably sent to some mission field. And I see some of those hymnals back in some missionaries' house in that little mission church, maybe back in some little hut laying there, and somebody back there listening to singing those songs that you never dream would ever have a hymnal. Are we going to have that this Thanksgiving night?
That's still on the docket.
As long as we're not virus protected.
Yes. We should, if we can have it.
I just may make it a point to join you. I want to be down in that part of the country.
We'd love to have you.
That would be awesome.
I tell you, what we really wanted to do is get it so big. Gail said, y'all got to get this out of my house. If it's getting too big for my house, we need to go to the church and have it. I said, well, we can do that. We can put the chili on in the fellowship hall and grab the piano and everybody get around and we'll hand the hymn books out. And yeah, we'd love to have you. It's always a highlight and, just a great night, way to end that. And we had one of our choir members who just loves music, had never heard most of those songs, and he wept the whole night as we sang. He said he'd never had anything touch his heart like that as we sang those great songs. And still speaks. God still speaks through these great songs.
Absolutely. I try to have an appreciation for all kinds of music, but there's the songs of the past seem to have an ability, and I know it's the anointing, but
yes,
they get in you and they don't leave. They're in you. And you know this, you can be driving down the road and something will just pop into your mind and you'll start singing a song that you might not have sung in 5 years, but that song starts ministering to you because it's deep within you.
That is the truth. And I believe you're right. It is the work of the Holy Spirit.
This kind of music is what I learned was shape notes.
Shape note. Did your dad read shape notes? Did he? I guess he did. I guess he would have come along in that era.
Shape notes. And that's what I grew up on, was shape notes.
There you go.
My do, re, mi's, that was just the do, de, ra, re's and all that. That was just a part of my life.
Yeah. I love the story Jake Hess tells about some of the modern harmonies came in. You know, a lot of the purists, some of the old timers objected to that. And Jake said they'd gripe saying he's singing la instead of so, or so instead of la. Get him back. I'm not. He said he's singing the wrong syllable there, putting no sixth in there. But anyway, but good stuff. Well, Brother David, we thank you for being with us today on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. It has been wonderful talking about your dad, Vep, and his legacy in Southern Gospel. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's been my pleasure, buddy. Thank you for calling me.
Well, we look forward when our paths cross, and hopefully a little bit before maybe the end of the trail that we'll cross again. But until then, God bless you, and we look forward to talking with you again.
God bless you both.
It's been another great day here at the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. And once again, I loved hearing about Vep's part of bringing us the Redback hymnal.
I never really knew Vep's part and the critical role that he played in the legacy of that Redback hymnal. What an important part of Southern gospel music, even today. I loved also hearing the great stories about Vep and his commitment to being a gospel artist and a minister of the gospel, and his commitment to that, even when offered what the world would call an offer you couldn't refuse. That goes to the heart of the kind of man that Vep Ellis was.
So until next week, I'm Wendell Carr, and for Andy Daughtry and myself, we hope to see you here next week on the Grand Old Gospel Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Grand Old Gospel Podcast. If you'd like to hear more, hit the subscribe button. While you're at it, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Grand Old Gospel Podcast for updates and video clips of the groups mentioned on this week's podcast. Also, check out our website at anchor.fm/Grand Old Gospel Podcast for a list of our current and past episodes. Until next week from the Grand Old Gospel Podcast, keep on singing a gospel song.